Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Punaktu Sahaviryam Karabhavahai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishabhai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi. Yo antaha pravishya mama vacha imam prashuptam sanjeevayati akhila shaktidhara swadamna अन्यांश्च हस्तचरणश्रवणत्वगादीन् प्राणान् नमो भगवते पुरुषाय तुभ्यं लसतु श्रीमदानन्दतीर्थेन्दुर्नो हृदम्बरे यद्वचश्चन्द्रिका स्वान्तसन्तापं विनिकृन्तति पदवाक्यप्रमाणज्ञान् प्रणम्य शिरसा गुरून् व्याकरिष्ये यथा भूतं विष्णुतत्त्वविनिर्णयम्. So good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. We directly dive into the 28th session of Kata Upanishad. So we are in a very, very interesting session today. We have done, as you know, the first two mantras. So the second adhyaya, second valli, Puram Ekadvashajwaram Ajasya Avakracheta Saha Anushtaya Na Sochati Vimuktascha Vimuchyate Etadvaitat Hamsas Suchishat Vasu Antariksha Sat Hota Vedishat Atitir Duronashat Nrushad Varashad Rutashad Vyomashad Abja Goja Rutaja Adrija Rutam Brihat. So we've spent about 3-4 weeks, almost a month, just dissecting out these two mantras. So what I hope to do today is capture the next 3 sets of mantras that kind of link up with each other. So we will hopefully be able to finish the 3 mantras today. So what do the mantras say? So remember what we have been discussing so far. We spent a lot of time about the Hamsa and Suchi and how this Antaryamin is there in all of his creation, both in Chetanas and in Achetanas, that is both in sentient souls and in Jada Prakriti. This cosmic Antaryamin is there everywhere. So that was a key message of the Hamsa Gayatri mantra. And then what Yama does is, over the next 3 verses, he kind of brings back the same ideas about Prana Tattva, about how this Abhimani that controls the volition, that controls the metabolism of the body, controls the volition of souls, and how he is important. Yama is celebrating him. Yeah. So that is what the next, certainly the 2 verses in these 3 combinations are going to do that. So what is that verse? Urdvam pranam unnayati apanam pratyagasyati madhye vamanam asinam vishve deva upasate. Asya vishram samanasya sarirashtasya dehinaha dehad vimuchyamanasya kimmatra parishishyate yetadvaitate. Na pranena na apanena martyo jivati kashtana itarena tu jivanti Yasmin Neta Upashrita. So those are the 3 verses that we are going to be doing here. So what is Yama trying to teach Nachiketa here? So we are kind of familiar with these ideas. So I don't think I will have to spend too much time with this particular slide. But you know that Hamsaha, inspiration, expiration, prana and apana. Those ideas were introduced by Yama in the second verse. And he wants us to think about this problem a little bit more. Yeah, this is physiology and philosophy of breathing. Yeah, we are all familiar with the pranayama and so on. So is it all just physiological, or what is the philosophical aspect of this breathing? You know, we breathe every day. It is controlled by the autonomic nervous system, and we are not even aware that we are breathing. Nevertheless, we are breathing every day. And how does that breathing mechanism happen? Let me just brush up your memory again. So you got the inspiration when the diaphragm moves down, that's inspiration. When the diaphragm moves up, that's expiration. So this inspiration and expiration of the diaphragm is controlled by the brain stem. So there are certain areas in the brain that are they're called as inspiratory centers and expiratory centers, apneustic center, pneumotaxic center, and so on in the brain stem that controls autonomically, that is without you and me being aware, it controls inspiration and expiration. And of course, the whole idea here is to pump oxygen into your body through the heart so that metabolism happens inside your body. And then the metabolism provides the heat and the energy that is required to drive the biochemical processes in your cells. Okay. So, but Yama is now wanting us to ask a bigger question. Why does this have to be like this? Yeah. And who controls this? Yeah. So this is a bigger level philosophical question. Who controls the breathing? Yeah. We can't just say this is the brain stem that's controlling the breathing, because brain stem is made of matter and it is jada. It is not capable of self-initiated activity. That is the philosophical position of Veda Vyasa, that no non-sentient being can have the capacity for self-initiated action. So here the philosophy is, Yama is wanting us to ask, have you ever wondered why does breathing has to be like this? Inspiration, expiration, that is for this body, which is a sadhana sharira. And the question is, who controls it? Okay, so I've given you an image here of a blacksmith bellowing analogy. So here is a blacksmith, and here he's using this thingy here, which is, I believe, called the bellow, where he is moving it up and down. So when he moves up and down, air flows through this tube, and that heats up, and that fuels the fire, and the fire comes out, and then you can heat whatever you want here. So this is a simple example of how a blacksmith generates fire by apana and prana. If you look at this inspiration and expiration, it's a similar mechanism of pushing it down and increasing it up so that the air moves forwards and then air moves inwards and outwards. So if you look at this analogy here, this is very much like our respiration. Our lungs are also doing the same thing. Okay, our lungs are also doing exactly the same thing as the blacksmith doing on the bellow. So the question is, who's making it do this? Who is that person behind this bellow that is pushing it forwards and backwards? So that is the philosophy that Yama is asking. And here I just wanted to open up for today's discussion. This is a question that we may want to think about ourselves. Are we alive because we are breathing, or we are breathing because we are alive? And I hope you got that question right. Are we alive because we are breathing, or we are breathing because we are alive? So who wants to, take up this question and come up with some ideas here? I'm just going to open it up for the group. Any views?
So I think we are breathing because we are alive.
Okay. Why do you think that, Ajit?
If you think of if you're not alive, then these receptors or your brainstem cannot function, and it's only because of that, the function of the brainstem, that you're breathing. So the first thing is that the prana has to be in the body, and only then can the functions of the body start more independently.
Yeah. Thank you, Ajit. Excellent. Deval, anything else? You had something to contribute there.
No, it's the same thing.
Same thing. Okay. So I think Ajit has raised a very interesting point here, that we are first alive and then we breathe. Okay. So let's explore this idea a little bit more. Okay. So this is what Yama says in this verse. Urdhvam pranam unnayati apanam pratyagasyati. Okay, this is very easy. So here Yama has taken only two components of prana. Okay, so this is interesting. There are 5 forms of supreme, right? We have the Mula Rupa, and then we have the 4 forms of Vyuha, and this 5 together forms the 5 forms of supreme that is described in the Upanishads, in the Vedas, in the Puranas, and so on. So you have the Mula Rupa, that is Narayana, and then you have Vasudeva, Sankarshana, Pradyumna, Aniruddha. So there are 5 forms of the Supreme. So what the scriptures also describe is, this very important tattva that is there, that the prana tattva, that is also got 5 forms. Okay, very similar to the Supreme, celebrated in 5 forms. This prana has also got 5 forms. And what are the 5 forms of the prana? Prana, Udana, Vyana, Samana, and Apana. So we are all familiar with these 5 forms of prana. Okay. Remember, I'm talking about the the sentient being behind these 5 processes. Okay. So, for example, this prana tattva is described in the Upanishads to have 5 forms: prana, udana, vyana, and samana and apana. Okay. And there are also other types of prana, udana, vyana, samana, apana that is described in the Vedic scripture, which we are not going to be dealing with today. But I'm going to just focus on the 5 forms of prana tattva. And Yama picks up the 2 important ones: urdvam pranam unnayati, apanam pratyagasyati. Okay, so this is the first idea that I wanted to introduce and let you think about how there are 5 forms of the Supreme. Similarly, there are 5 forms of the prana. Okay, now, so apanam pratyagasyati. So what is apana? Apana is that is a downward force, whereas urdvam pranam unnayati. So the prana is the upward force. So when you look at the gross respiration and inspiration in this process, when the air moves upwards, that is our expiration. So that could be called as prana. And when we inspire, the air goes inwards, that could be called as apana in the grossest form. But actually, it is the energy flow that is described as prana and apana. So the energy flow that goes upwards through the nadis is called the prana. And the apana is that goes downwards. Okay. So then, of course, we have now discussed that this whole process, and I showed you the chap below, the bellow, who pushes up and down. So that should give you the idea. So this is what the Upanishad is telling us and asking us to think about. So that process is controlled by 2 forms or 2 aspects of this prana tattva. One aspect is called apana and another one is called prana. Okay, so we again thought about how and why does this happen this way is what we should be thinking. And prana, as I said, has got 2 forms. Okay, so then when you look at this problem like this of inspiration and expiration, then you realize our Vedic Rishis are not just thinking about the physiological aspects of inspiration and expiration, but they are thinking about the Abhimani Devatas, and they are thinking about the spiritual aspect of inspiration and expiration. Yeah. And then he also introduces the idea in the very next verse, Madhye Vamanam Asinam Vishve Devaha Upasate. So I'll come to that in the next slide. Hold on to that thought. Because what we should not forget always is the Gita 15, 16, and 17. So again, let's recite this again. Who wants to take up this verse? Gita 15th chapter 16 to 17. Ajit and team have just done the chapter 15. So who wants to contribute there? Okay, no worries. I'll do it. So Dwa imo purushau loke kshara akshara evacha ksharaha sarvani bhutani kutasto akshara uchyate uttamaha purushastu anyaha paramatma iti udahurutaha. And that is why this verse, these sets of 3 lines, is the most important verses of philosophy. When we understand this in all its glory, we can never fall victim to misinterpretations of Shastras. Okay, so here we know that this guy is the Akshara. Okay, Lakshmi is the Kutasto Akshara, and Chaturmukha, Prana, and everybody is Kshara, which means they are all Jivas. So this is the idea here. So even Prana Tattva, Chaturmukha, and everybody that come below him are all categorized as Kshara Jivas. So in that sense, yes, there is a physiological inspiration and expiration. There is the Abhimani Devata, but that Abhimani Devata is also Jiva. So we should not forget that. It could be an exalted Jiva, but nevertheless, it is still a Jiva. Yeah, it is just a Jiva like you and me, but extremely exalted. Okay, so that is what our Yama is immediately telling us in this verse. Yes, urdvam pranam unnayati, apanam pratyagasyati. Yes, this prana tattva in 2 forms, apana and prana, is regulating respiration. But then this prana tattva is also a jiva and is also a dependent being. So the question there is, under whose control is this prana tattva then working? Okay, in whose control is this prana tattva working? In whose independent control is the prana tattva working? Is the next question. So immediately Yama says, Madhye Vamana Asinam Vishve Devaha Upasate. Okay. So this supreme entity which is there in the mid portion of your body, Madhye. Madhye means middle. Hrid, as you know, Hrid Kamala, all those things we have done a million times. So Hrid also means middle portion of the body. Okay. Sandeha. Sandeha also means it's the middle portion of the body. Madhye, Sandeha, and Hrit, they are all synonymous. So Yama says, Madhye Vamanamasinam. So telling us, there is this supreme being who is called Vamana in the Vedas. He is the one who controls the prana, and then prana then delivers his duties. What is the duty? Inspiration and expiration. Now, this is interesting because here Yama has said, Madhye Vamanam Asinam. Okay. Whereas you may recall in the same Kata Upanishad, 2nd Adhyaya, 1st Valli, 12th mantra, we have done this. Angushta matraha purushe madhye atmani tishtati. Ishanam bhutabhavyasya natato vijigupsate etadvaitat. So he has said the similar kind of verse in the previous Valli, where what he has said is this supreme being who is in the Madhya, Atmani Tishtati, in the middle portion of the body he is there, he is being celebrated Angushta Matraha. He is of the size of the thumb. Yeah. Angushta Patraha Purusho Madhye Atmani Tishtati. So who is this Angushta Matra? This verse has said Ishanam. He is the supreme controller. He is the independent being who controls everything else. Okay, so you need to think about, so again, when we do all these Upanishad studies, we should always be going back and forth in the different portions of the Upanishads and understand what is the internal correlation and relevance to what Yama is talking about. Okay, so why is it relevant? Let's just summarize all the various Upanishads verses with regards to where the Jiva is and where the Paramatma is, and we have done this verse before. Anoranyan mahato mahihan na atma asya jantor nihito guhayam. And in Taittreya Upanishad, we said nihitam guhayam parame vyoman. In Dahara Vidya, again it is said he is there in this Daharam Pundarikam. He is in this inverted lotus leaves. So all the Upanishads are saying the same thing, that this supreme is in the middle portion of our body, which here is called Madhya. Okay. Even in Gita 13:18 and 15:15 again, Sarvasya cha aham hrudi sannivishtaha. Okay, Jnanam Nyayam Jnanagamyam Hrudi Sarvasya Vishtitam. So everywhere this is something that we need to be absolutely 100% clear in our head, that the supreme is in the middle portion of the heart, because it is in the middle portion of the heart where the jiva is, and the supreme being is inside the jiva, is the view of the Upanishads. Of course, the supreme being is all pervasive. But for our contemplation, because we are jivas and we are atomic or subatomic, and we have been described to be present in the middle portion of the body, the Upanishad then reminds us that inside you, yeah, not your body, but inside you as a jiva is where the Paramatma is. Okay, and what is that Paramatma? What is his name? So Yama here celebrates him as Vamanamasinam. So this Angushta Matraha Purushaha is the same Vamana. It is just given a different name for us to understand the attributes of the Supreme Being, Vamana. So in fact, Veda Vyasa has settled this problem. And there is all these philosophers debate about what is this Angushta Matraha, and here in the two Vallis. And Veda Vyasa has actually settled this problem by composing two sutras, Shabdad Eva Pramitaha. Shrudya Apekshyatu Manushya Adhikaritva. So check these sutras out and see how it correlates. And this is how Veda Vyasa has helped us to understand that this Angushta Matraha is the supreme Paramatma, and that Paramatma is called Vamana, or is celebrated as Vamana by Yama in this particular Valli and in this particular verse. So here, I've just opened it up for further discussion because the word Vamana has come, and Vamana is a particularly a resounding word for Vaishnava philosophy. I think we should spend some time to think about what is Vamana. So Madhye Vamanam Asinam Vishve Devaha Upasate. Okay, so I'm going to just break for a minute, and I would want folks to contribute about who is Vamana of the Puranas. What is Vamana avatar? Which avatar of Vishnu is Vamana? And I would be very grateful if somebody could share their information about the Vamana avatar, please. So who wants to go for this one? Which avatar of Vishnu is Vamana? Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th.
Fourth.
Fourth, Manjuna ji is saying fourth. Anybody has got a different view?
Fifth, I think, Madhuji.
What?
Mastya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrsimha, Vamana.
Fifth.
Fifth.
Okay, Padmaja ji is saying fifth. Anybody else has a different view? So fourth or the fifth. So I think the answer is the fifth. So Vamana is the fifth avatara of Vishnu. So who is going to tell us something about Vamana avatara? Why did Vamana avatara happen? That will be interesting for us to, recapitulate and understand the greatness of Vamana avatara. What is the other name of Vamana? That is also another quiz. What is the other name of Vamana that is celebrated in Sanatana?
Trivikrama.
Trivikrama, very good. Yes, Vamana is also called Trivikrama. Okay, so that should give us a clue as to what it is that Vamana Avatara accomplished. And the clue is in the image itself. So who is going to give us the background to it?
Vamana came to, as you said, Trivikrama is to control all the three worlds. And he comes down because of Mahabali, who is quite powerful. And because of his, he was sort of ruling all the worlds, and Vamana comes down. And at the point, Mahabali is performing a yajna, and he says that he could have whatever wishes he wants. And his guru tries to dissuade him from offering the wishes to Vamana. And Vamana says he needs 3 paces of land, and he covers the entire universe with a couple of paces. And the third step, then he places onto Mahabali's head, and in a way, I think probably gets rid of his ego and pushes him down into Patala.
Brilliant, Ajit. Thank you so much for giving us that information. But as you know, the background, yeah, you captured 90% of the information. The most important one is basically Indra is actually removed from his post as the king of the Devatas, and Bali Chakravarti actually captures all the Devatas and goes and sits there. And that is how the whole plot starts, as you know. And Bali is whose grandson? Who wants to take this question? Bali Chakravarti or Mahabali, who is his grandson?
Prahalada.
Prahalada, absolutely right. So Prahalada is Bali's grandson, and Hiranyakashipu is his his great grandfather is Hiranyakashipu. So he has quite a record of demonic kings, and he goes and sits in the Indraloka. And then, of course, that's when Vamana Avatar takes. So, in whose I wouldn't say womb, but who is the father and mother of Vamana when he is born? Who is going to take this?
Aditi and Kashyapa. Aditi and Kashyapa.
Excellent. So that is Aditi and Kashyapa's 11th son is Vamana. So he comes out, and then he then goes to to Bali Chakravarti's palace, and then, as Ajit ji very beautifully explained, the whole story behind the idea there is Bali had to find his destination, and Vamana made him find his destination, and Indra then comes back and becomes the king of the Devatas. So that is the story in Puranas. So think about this Vamana. We all know Vamana means somebody who's short. Okay, so that is the view that we have always been given. So the Vamana is this boy who is very small and short, and he holds a wooden umbrella, and then he goes to Bali Chakravarti. That is fine, but the real etymological, because that is what we are interested in when we do Upanishad discourses, what is the etymology of Vamana? When I think about Vamana, what qualities of the Supreme can I understand? So that is what Vamana actually means. Vamana, what is the etymology? Vamam, Saundaryam, Nayati iti Vamanaha. So Vamana means that which is beautiful. that which looks very nice, that which looks pleasant, and that which looks beautiful. Essentially telling us this being, the supreme being, is an abode of infinite auspicious attributes, and he is beautiful. Yeah, so that is the idea of Vamanam. And when this young boy, Ajit, as you very nicely mentioned, when this young short person called Vamana entered into the palace of Bali Chakravarti, he was so beautiful and he was so shining, and everybody knew that this is an unusual person who has come into this palace. Okay, again, you can understand the meaning of Vamana. And as Padmajaji mentioned, Vamana is also called Trivikrama. And this Trivikrama, the 3 strides that he takes, is described very beautifully in the Rig Veda. Yeah. So anybody wants to interested in looking at the Rig Veda verses, Idam Vishnur Vichakrame Tridani Tade Padam. Yeah, Rig Veda celebrates this. Even in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, this Vamana entity is celebrated. So we all understand from the Puranas that we know that this Vamana is an avatar of Vishnu. Yeah, and hence Yama here celebrates that Vishnu Tattva, or the supreme being who is your Antaryaman, he is Angushta Matraha, he is small in the sense Anoraniyan, he is inside you, you are subatomic. To bring home that message, he uses the word Vamanam. Okay, and then the next words after that is very interesting. It says Madhye Vamanam Asinam. So if you think this red circle here is the Jiva, this Vamana or the Antaryamin or the Brahman is inside the Jiva. Okay, and you know what? Yama is telling some profound philosophical, spiritual truths here. So you have the Jiva, which is the yellow blob here, and the red one is the Brahman, and Vamana is Brahman. Yeah. So the yellow blob is Jiva, and the Jiva is covered by the various Shariras, and we will come to that next. But these Shariras, and the Shariras, what do? They have various Indriyas and various Tattva Abhimanis who ensure that this material body of this Jiva works properly. And also a higher level of philosophy is the Jiva also has Swarupa Indriyas. Jiva has its own eternal eyes, eternal ears, eternal sense organs of various types. And the philosophy there, which is not necessary for today's discussion, is even those aspects of the Jiva Swarupa Indriya also is controlled by certain higher beings. Okay. So what are these guys doing? Agni, Ganesha, Rudra, Brahma, Parvati, Kama, Kartikeya, Indra. I've just put a few examples here. What they are doing is, and Yama is saying, these guys, Vishwe Devaha Upasate. So all these higher exalted Abhimani Devatas that control various aspects of this gross body, including inspiration and expiration, are around this Vamana Tattva, and they are always upasate, they are always praying, and they are always doing their own, worship and sacrifice to this Brahman who is inside. And that is how the philosophy expands, isn't it? When you expand this more and more, and when you come to the gross Indriyas, that is where the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita also fits in very nicely. Okay, and here is another idea, and as I told you, Vamam means Saundaryam. So when we are alive, we are beautiful in the sense, we don't have to be Mr. Universe or Miss Universe, but the body is beautiful when it is alive. When Vamana leaves, the body is a dead body. Okay, nobody says the dead body is beautiful. People could make it up, do all sorts of decoration, put it in boxes for thousands of people to come and see and whatever. But that is a dead body. It is no longer beautiful because Vamana, the beautiful being who gives beauty to everybody, once he leaves the body, it is no longer beautiful. In fact, the Upanishads also talk about, not this particular Upanishad, but in other Upanishads, in fact, it is also discussed that this Vamana is not only in the heart, in the middle portion of the heart, and makes the bodies alive and make them beautiful, but he is also inside the eyes. And there is no surprises there, because who is the Abhimani Devata of eye? Who is going to answer that? Who is Abhimani of eyes?
Surya.
Surya, thank you. So, inside Surya is whom? Inside Surya is Surya Narayana. So, in certain Upanishads, you will see that Surya Narayana is also celebrated as Vamana, and that Vamana is inside the eyes. And because the Vamana is inside the eyes, he has given beauty to the eyes. And in fact, we all know that beauty of a person, particularly women, I am told, is in their eyes. And identification of a person is through their eyes. Yeah. So that is also another idea. And again, Upanishads, there's a particular Upanishad that talks about the eye where Vamana is there. And you will be amazed to know that it takes the sclera, it takes the cornea, it takes the iris, it takes the lens, and it takes every component of the eye and says in each component of the eye is this particular Abhimani Devata, and in the middle is this Vamana who is giving the beauty to these eyes. Okay. So I hope you are able to appreciate that the word Vamana is not just talks about a dwarf avatar of Vishnu. The idea of Vamana is all pervasive in the Upanishads, and it's got an entirely different approach to it. Vamanam means Saundaryam. Vamana, he may be small because he is inside your heart. He is Anoranyan, but he is beautiful, and he gives beauty to you. He gives beauty to your eyes. And all the Vishwa Devatas, yeah, all the Devatas, all the higher exalted sentient being of the Brahmanda, and also those Abhimani Devatas that control your body, they are all constantly worshipping this Vamana who is there right in the middle portion of your body. So this is very, very important for us to understand as to where the Jiva is placed, where the Lord is placed, and how does Yama describe this Lord as Angushta Matraha Purushaha and also Madhye Vamanam Asinam. Okay. So then after he has described this, there is another beautiful verse that immediately comes. Asya Visramsa Manasya Sarirashtasya Dehinaha Dehad Vimuchyamanasya Kimmatra Parishishyate Etad Vaitat. So immediately, because this covering he is talking about, and he's talking about this Jiva and this Brahman, our Guru Yama then, he gives this very, very, very profound verse of Kata Upanishad. And to understand this, I want to spend the rest of the talk actually discussing this aspect. Yeah. So remember, the very first Adhyaya, first Valli, 20th mantra, that is where the third Vara started. Okay. Yama, Nachiketa asked the third Vara at the 20th verse in the first Valli, and we are still at it. We are in the third Adhyaya, second Valli, and we are still talking about it. So the question is, what is it that Nachiketa actually asked? I just want to remind all of us as to what it is that he actually asked. He asked Yama, Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye astiti eke na ayam astiti cha eke. Etad vidyam anushishta svaya aham varanamesha varaha tritiyaha. So this is the third vara I want. What is that? Yeyam prete vichikitsa. When I leave this body, when somebody leaves this body, vichikitsa, there is a doubt in manushas. Manushas there means mananashilas, the ones that think. And they ask, asti iti eke. One group of people think that there is asti. Asti means this jiva is there. And inside him is this Paramatma, and he is there. Is one view. Asti iti eke. Na ayam asti iti cha eke. So easy to read those verses. And there is another group that thinks it is nothing. Once the body is gone, you are gone. There is no soul. There is no Paramatma, nothing. It is just a material concoction that we have made up. It is all one big lie. There is nothing called soul. There is nothing called Paramatma and so on. That is the other group. And we all know that is the atheist group. And this is the theistic group. So Nachiketa is I'd asked that question on our behalf as to when this body withers away, when this body falls down, is there anything left or not? Okay, this is an important question for us. Yeah, there are billions of people on the planet who go about their life not even thinking about this problem. Okay? When I am gone, when this body falls down, and when it is burnt or buried or given to the birds, is anything of me left or not? Or have I just dissolved and gone? Okay? This is a fundamental philosophical question, right? And that is the question that Nachiketa asked in the first Valli. So our Guru Yama, having gone through all this over the last several months with us, he then puts in an amazing verse here to also, bring home this truth. I've told you all this, Vamana, Madhyam, Asinam, and so on. Why am I telling all this, Nachiketa? Because Asya Vishram Samanasya Sharirastasya Dehinaha Dehad Vimuchyamanasya Kimmatra Parishishyate Etad Vaitat. Okay, so to understand the beauty of this verse, we need to go to the basics. We need to understand what is Sharira, what is Deha. They all appear to be the same, isn't it? But are they different? Sharira means this body. Deha means this body. And what has Yama done here? He has used very clever words here. He has put Sharira, Dehinaha, Dehat. They're all similar to be very repetitive. Okay? No, it is not repetitive. Our Upanishad is a great scripture. It is full of knowledge. It is only our mistake if we look at these words and say they talk about the same thing. Absolutely not. Yama is giving us some profound truths here. And what is that profound truth? And this is a busy slide, and I want to spend the rest of the talk hopefully talking to you about this, because last week Devalji was mentioning about how do we link Panchakoshas, Dehas, and the Brahmanda and Pindanda, and we had some discussions in the Q&A session about this. Padmaja ji also was inquiring about this. How do we link all this? Thankfully for us, Yama has actually brought this in this particular verse, allowing us to make this discussion. Okay, so let me take through this slide, and I hope it will make sense. Okay, so to understand this verse that Yama has put, we need to go all the way to pre-creation. We need to go to that phase of our journey as souls where the universe has not come into being. Okay, the jivas are in the womb of the Brahman in a suspended animation state. The gross material world is in a suspended animation state, equipoise of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, what we call as Mula Prakriti. And it is there in the womb of the Supreme. So think about the situation of you as Jiva. Okay, so here is the profound truth of Vedic philosophy, and which is that there was never a point in the career of souls, the souls did not have a Linga Sharira. Okay, they were always had the Linga Sharira, which is a very, very subtle covering made of matter that covers the soul. The subtle matter that covers the soul. So go with me with this, because I'm going to link everything in a few minutes. Okay, for those who are impatient, please bear with me, so because I'm going to explain all this. So you have the soul in pre-creation who always have Linga Sharira. Linga Sharira is where you have the karmic imprints. Linga Sharira is where you have the ignorance that we have discussed about. And Linga Sharira is where you have the deep memory of all the lives that you have had. You might have been you are in the Pralaya state, but the Pralaya and Srishti is an eternal cycle, right? So it is very likely that in those infinite eternal cycles, at some point, we might have come back into the universal existence. Okay? And then we would have made some experiences, and those experiences would have gone into deep memory, which is again there in the Linga Sharira. So this Jiva always has this. There is never a point where the Jiva did not have it. So that is a philosophical position, and you need to think about it. Okay. So once creation happens, okay, i.e. the material world has come into being, and we have been through all this 9 stages of creation in Bhagavatam, and we go back to those slides. But essentially what happens is, when the Jivas come into creation, they acquire additional sheets. That is what we call as the creation of Jivas. Okay. Creation for Jiva is they acquire a material body. What is that material body? They have always had a material body, which is a very subtle body called the Linga Sharira. But when they come into creation, they acquire other bodies. So instructs our Vedic scripture and Vedic philosophy. There's something called the Sukshma Sharira, and then there is something called the Stula Sharira. It is the Stula Sharira, that is me and you, and we are all sitting here doing the satsang because we all have our Stula Sharira. And inside our Stula Sharira is the Sukshma Sharira. Inside the Sukshma Sharira is the Linga Sharira. And inside the Linga Sharira is the Jiva Swarupa. Okay, so that is the anatomy of us as beings. We actually have 4 bodies, 3 coverings. Stula Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, Linga Sharira, Jiva Swarupa. Okay? These are basic ideas that we need to keep thinking about. So this is what is going on when we are in samsara. What is samsara? Coming into contact with gross matter and experiencing the external world. So that is the creation for us. Okay? So that creation essentially means we've got a Sukshma Sharira and we got a Stula Sharira. So if you look at it in a different way, this is gross, this is subtle, this is the subtlest. Okay, so that is the 3 grades of material covering that you have. Okay, but at the same time, we also talk about Panchakoshas. Yeah, Jivas have Panchakoshas. So let us go through what is the Panchakosha here. So the Panchakosha is what? You have Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manonmaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, and Anandamaya Kosha. So this is also described in our Shastras that the Jivas have 5 koshas. Now I've said they got 3 coverings, material coverings, but I'm also saying that they got 5 koshas. So then the question will be, are different Upanishads talking about different things, or they are talking about the same thing? And let me tell you, there is one sutra called Gati Samanyat by Vedavyasa in the first Adhyaya. Gati Samanyat means everywhere in the Vedas, they talk about the same thing. We may not be able to understand it, but they talk the same thing, and we need to approach the Vedas with gurus who can actually direct us as to how we do that samanvaya so that they're talking the same thing. So let me actually apply this here. Okay, so Annamaya Kosha, Anna means what? Made of solid and liquid. Okay, so that aspect of the material world that forms the gross body is actually made of Aap and Prithvi, or Aap and Annam as it's called. So these 2 together form the Annamaya Kosha. So when you look at the 3 layers of the body of the Jiva, this becomes the Stula Sharira. Okay, the Stula Sharira that I talk about is the Annamaya Kosha, which is made up of Prithvi and Aap. So then I have the Sukshma Sharira. So the Sukshma Sharira, what does that correspond to? So we have now understood what Annamaya Kosha is. Now we have Pranamaya Kosha, Manonmaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha. These 3 form the Sukshma Sharira. Okay. Prana, Manas, and Buddhi. And Manas, of course, has got various components, and then you have memory. So these go into the Sukshma Sharira. Whereas there is this another kosha of the Jiva which is always with us. It's called the Anandamaya Kosha, which is called Chetana. Okay? That forms the Linga Sharira or Karana Sharira of Jivas. Okay, so think about this slide. Come back to this slide and have a rumination on this, because in the right hand side here, I've then put how does that link with Brahmanda. Okay, and this is where the beauty of Vedic philosophy is. It's completely in sync with whatever it says. So in Brahmanda, what is happening? You have this Mula Prakriti, which is the subtlest of matter. The subtlest of matter is the Linga Sharira. Okay, and then what happens is this Mula, the subtlest of matter, then as we know, it becomes Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, and then that becomes Mahat Tattva. Okay, and the Mahat, as we know, becomes Ahankara. Ahankara then becomes Vaikarika, Tejasa, and Tamasa. One aspect of Tamasa becomes Tanmatra, and the Tanmatras become Bhutas. And the Bhutas are what? Akasha, Vayu, Tejas, Aap, and Prithvi. Okay, so no surprises there. This Aap and Prithvi of the Panchabhutas is the Aap and Prithvi of your body. And again, it's logical. because we eat rice, we drink water. What is that? That is the Panchabhuta. And what we eat and what we drink actually becomes the gross body. So that is Apan Prithvi, which is the Stula Sharira. Okay. Whereas Sukshma Sharira has got various components, right? You have Pranamaya Kosha, Manonmaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha. So let's look at Pranamaya Kosha. Vayu, Tejas, and Akasha forms the Pranamaya Kosha. Why? Because you need space, you need air for the metabolism to happen. And when metabolism is happen, heat is generated, which is what we have been doing all along in this particular section. So Akasha and Vayu, Tejas forms one component of Sukshma Sharira, which is the Pranamaya Kosha. Okay. So then you have this whole ideas of your mind. Mind has got 5 components, right? Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara. Yeah, 3. Let us take the 3 components here. So Ahankara, how does this Indriyas come in? What are the various components of the Manas? How do the Manas come from? Manas come from Vaikarika evolute of Ahankara Tattva, which is the evolute of Mahat Tattva, which is these are all subtle matters. So that Manas becomes another component of Sukshma Sharira. Okay. Manas becomes the component of Manonmaya Kosha. Then you have this Buddhi, or where the intellect is, where the memory shell is. Okay. And where is all this memory shell? Mahat Tattva. So the Buddhi component has actually got 2 aspects to it. There is one aspect of Vaikarika and the Mahat Tattva, which is another subtle matter where the memory shell is. Okay. So that forms another component of the Sukshma Sharira. So Pranamaya Kosha, Manonmaya Kosha, and Vijnanamaya Kosha together form the Sukshma Sharira. Whereas the Anandamaya Kosha is the Linga Sharira or Karana Sharira, or it is called Linga Deha. Okay, you have to think about this and memorize this, because that is where this Linga Deha concept comes from, and that is where the Stula Sharira concept comes from. So in this slide, I hope I've been able to impress upon you that the consistency is 100% of bringing in Panchakoshas, Linga Sharira, Sukshma Sharira, and Stula Sharira, and the Brahmanda. And as Sudarshan was mentioning in the previous class, our body is just a component of the Brahmanda. We are stardust, as Carl Sagan mentioned once. We are stardust. So true from a Vedic perspective. We are stardust because whatever is there in Brahmanda is there in the Pindanda. Okay, so linking Pindanda and Brahmanda is very, very important to understand what it is that Yama is actually teaching us here. Okay, so what has he said here? Asya visram samanasya sharirastasya dehinaha dehat vimuchyamanasya kimmatra parishishyate etadvaitate. So now I hope you're able to capture what does that sharira. The sharira there means stula sharira. Deha that Yama has said means a linga deha. So to understand what is it that Yama is telling, or the Kata Rishi is saying in this Krishna Yajur Veda Upanishad, is for us to have this background information of all the shariras that the jiva has. So once we have understood that, then it all fits into very beautifully. Okay. Asya Vishram Samanasya. Vishram Samana means shed or falls off. Okay. What falls off? Yama immediately says Sharira. Sharira falls off. Okay. And that is the etymology of Sharira. Sharira means what? Shiryata iti Shariraha. That which falls down is Sharira. This Stula Sharira, or the gross body, will be there for some few years, maybe 100 years, and then it will fall off. So that is why it is called Sharira. So Yama is saying, Asya Vishram Samanasya Sharirastasya Dehinaha. Look at this word, Dehinaha. Deha means body. He who is inside the body is called Dehinaha, and that is the soul. Okay, so that should again give you this idea about the soul and the various bodies, including the Stula Sharira. Okay, so Yama is saying, you know, in this cycle of samsara, what is happening? Every time you're going through this cycle of samsara, you'll be here for a few tens of hundreds of years. You'll shed your gross body, and you'll carry on with your Sukshma Sharira and Linga Sharira. and then you'll capture another womb, and then you acquire another gross body. Okay, and then start experiencing the life, and then again shed, and again you keep going. Okay, so this cycle is one types of Vishram Samanasya Sharira. So you're constantly shedding your body. Okay, but Yama is saying it is not only that. Dehat Vimuchyamanasya. So when you reach your journey of souls, you reach a stage in your sadhana where you're not only shedding your Stula Sharira, but you're also shedding your Linga Deha. So that is what he says in the next line. Dehat Vimuchyamanasya. Again, Vimuchyamana is the same. Leaves, sheds off, get rid of. So when you get rid of the Linga Deha, Dehat Vimuchyamanasya. So this is amazing verse that actually gives you the idea of Vedic philosophy of journey of souls. So Vishram Samanasya Sharirina, Sharirastasya Dehinaha, Dehat Vimuchyamanasya. So that means your sadhana is such that you have not only shed your Stula Sharira, but you have reached such an exalted position where you don't have any of this. You don't have karma, you don't have ignorance, you don't have any, you're okay, you'll have your deep memory, but the key ones is the karma and the ignorance that leads you on to back and forth in your samsara. When you have exhausted all your karmas, when you don't have any ignorance, you will reach a time where you will not be born again. That's it. You are there at that point. Okay. And then you only have Linga Deha at that point. Okay? And we have done this. We have done these verses from Mundaka Upanishad at some point. And in the Mahapralaya, when this whole universe comes to dissolution, then along with Chaturmukha Brahma, the Vedas say that you go through this interface that is called the Viraja Nadi, where you shed your Linga Deha and you cross over to the other side. So this blue thingy here is the Linga Deha. And you shed this in that interface, and then you cross over to the transempirical brain. So that is what Yama says. Dehat Vimuchyamanasya. So when you have shed your Linga Deha, Kimatra Parishishyate? Kim? ? Atra Parishishyate. What remains? Yetad vai tat. Okay, so this is the profound truth of Yama. He says, when you cross over, when you are in the Muktisthana, Kimmatra Parishishyate, what is left behind? You asked me in that 1:120, that verse, Yeyam prete vichikitsa manushye asti iti eke, na ayam asti iti cha eke. That question you asked, no? This is the truth, Nachiketa. This is the truth of the Vedas. Kimmatra Parishishyate, etad vaitate. Jiva is there. Yetad is also there. That which is very close to you. We have done this a million times. Yetad means that which is extremely close to you. Who is extremely close? Our Antaryaman is extremely close to it. And that is what he says. Yetad vai tat. Okay. So in this one particular verse, Asya Visram Samanasya Sharirastasya Dehinaha Dehat Vimuchyamanasya Kimmatra Parishishyate Yetad vai tat is the full journey of souls that is compressed in 2 lines. And for us to understand what is this Sharira and what is this Deha, we need to have a grasp of Panchakosha and the various components of Pindanda and Brahmanda. And again, we have done this, and I want to finish this session with a couple of slides, but this verse is very important. Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad also talks about the same thing, isn't it? Yada Pashyaha Pashyate Rukmavaranam Kartaram Isham Purusham Brahmayonim Tada Vidwan Punya Papena Viduya Niranjanaha Paramam Samyamopeti. Niranjanaha. Niranjanaha means without any defects. The Linga Sharira has got no defects. Pure. Te Brahmalokeshu Parantakale Param Amruta Parim Uchayanti Sarve. Let me read this again. Te Brahmalokeshu Parantakale Para Amrutaha Parimuchayanti Sarve. So Parantakala means Mahapralaya, which is going to take billions of years from now. At that point, when this Chaturmukha goes, you go. There, how are you? Pare avyaye sarve eki bhavanti yata nadyaha syandamanaha samudre astam gacchati. Yeah. Nama rupa vihaya tata vidwan nama rupa vimuktaha paratparam purishayam upeiti divyam. Sayoha vai tat paramam brahma veda brahmaiva bhavati na asya brahmavid kulo bhavati tarati shokam tarati papmanam guha agrantibhyo vimukto amruto bhavati. So this whole journey here of Mundaka Upanishad or Atharvana Upanishad of Atharva Veda actually describes this in great detail. So go back and maybe we will do Mundaka Upanishad next. So go back and look at all this. So this is what this verse is saying. That is what is left, Nachiketa. You don't have to feel depressed that when this Stula Sharira falls, you are a zero. Because some atheists, some materialists think that is the case. No, Vedic philosophy is different. Vedic perspective says there is a Vedic philosophy is very, very positive. Yeah, it is very optimistic. It gives us hope. And Yama in this verse actually gives us hope here. And he says, look, when the body is dead, it is not finished. Actually, you are still there. And then you should strive to reach that stage where you are pure and you are in the complete synchrony with the Brahman. That is our real salvation. That is our target that the Vedic Rishis again and again in all the Upanishads they talk about. Okay. So then this is the last verse for today, and I want to finish this with another 10 minutes. So this is the third verse. After he has spoken about all the greatness of prana, he then reminds us, even this prana tattva may be great because this one is responsible for your metabolism. This one is responsible, that is the living force inside you that makes you breathe and being alive. But Yama then says, na pranena na apanena martyoho jivati kashtana. That's easy. Martya means mortals, that is you and me. And Yama says, yes, prana tattva is great. But that is not the only reason why we are alive. Na pranena na apanena martyoho jivati kashtana. Itarena tu jivanti. Yasmin etav upashritav. Itarena tu jivanti. Itara means that which is totally different. Yeah, itara means different. That which is totally different from everything. It is totally different from matter. It is totally different from all the jivas. And it is an entirely different category on its own. So that is what the dvayumau purusho loke kshara akshara eva chaksharaha sarvani bhutani kutasto akshara uchyate uttamaha purushastu anyaha paramatma iti udahrataha. That anyaha is the itarena here. Yeah. So folks who think Jiva and Brahma, the same guys mixing and eventually they become the same, I have to burst their bubble because that is not what the language of the Upanishad here is. Itarena tu jivanti. They are alive and exist because of the itara. So let's look at this again. Na apanena, na pranena. When you look at it in a very material sense, physiological breathing, physiological inspiration, physiological expiration, is that the reason jivati kashtana, jivati, these mortals are alive? No. Is it because of the abhimani devatas? And as you know, any physiological principle has a spiritual principle in Vedic philosophy. Abhimani vyapadeshastu visesha anugatibhyam, as Veda Vyasa has resolved this problem for all of us. So, is it because of the abhimani devata of inspiration and expiration, which is prana and apana vayu? Is that the reason why they are jivati, the jiva is alive? No. And he says, antaryami yadi daivadishu tad dharma vyapadeshat. This is what Veda Vyasa resolves everywhere. And this is a magic sutra of Veda Vyasa. Antaryami yadi daivadishu tad dharma vyapadeshat. Everywhere there is the Supreme Brahman, and in all the jivas he is there as an antaryamin, including the abhimani devata. So, itarena tu jivanti. This antaryamin, who is anyaha of the chapter 15 of the Gita, he is inside even this prana tattva. And because he is inside the prana tattva, he is making this inspiration and expiration possible. That is why itarena tu jivanti. and yasmin na netau upashitau means these two. Tau means two. Who are these two? Prana and apana vayu. They are always under the ashrita of the Supreme. They are always under the control of the Supreme. Prana Tattva may be great, but still he is a dependent on this Itara. Okay, so that is the ultimate philosophy there of us being alive. We are alive because there is this Sat, and the Sat is inside the Prana Tattva. And then these two guys are in the Jiva Tattva, and the Jiva is in the body, and the body is doing inspiration and expiration, and we are alive because of that. So when you take that analogy here, then this prana and apana in this bellowing, this is the physiological prana apana. Whereas this guy who's pushing up and down is the prana tattva, and inside the prana is the mukhya, is the mukhya paramatma who is there. So that is why we are alive. So we need to be very, very mindful of this idea. So I just want to finish off with some grand visions of the Upanishads, and here in this section, in this last 5 mantras, Yama has spoken so much of the prana, apana. Consistently, he's been discussing about that, and that is not it's not mere coincidence. Okay, so the reason why I want to say that is, you look at any Upanishad, there will always be a discussion about prana and antaryami. It is in all the Upanishads. 10, you can take the Dasha Upanishads and look at them. Everywhere prana will be discussed. Okay, so we need to understand who this prana is before we are able to appreciate what is it that the Upanishads is telling us. And I hope over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've been able to give you a glimpse of what the prana, the philosophy of prana is. For those of you who are interested in this area, you can spend a lifetime trying to understand this prana, vayu. There are various types. There is the Marichi. Gita talks about Marichi Nam, Marutaha Marichi Nam Asmi. I am in the Marichis. There is Marichis. Then there is the other types of Apana, Prana, Vyana. There are other 5 types of prana. Then there is the Pravaha Vayu. Then there is the Ahankara Vayu. Then there is the Mukhya Vayu, and so on. So there are actually 50 Vayu Tattvas that are described in Vedic philosophy. 50. 49 plus 1. 1 is the Mukhya Prana, and 49 other Prana Tattvas that are described in the Vedic philosophy. Unfortunately, we don't have to think about it. We don't think about these things, but it is all out there in the Upanishads and the philosophies for us to explore. And what I have done today and in the last few sessions is to give you an idea of that. So this concept of cosmic sutram or prana and antaryami, which we can call it as Vishnu, but you give whatever name you want. Okay, the supreme being who is inside the prana is a recurrent theme in the Upanishad. Okay, so Antaryami Brahmanam is a very, very important Brahmanam where this will come in. So I'm just giving you a reference here. So go and look at Antaryami Brahmanam. Yeah, this is interesting, Antaryami Brahmanam, because our friend Uddalaka, who basically sanctioned Nachiketa to go to Yama, actually goes to the palace of Janaka of Vaideha, where there is a big conference that happens. Okay, in the 3rd Adhyaya of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, this is discussed, where there is all these famous philosophers of India who go to this the conference place conducted by Janaka. And where the Janaka says, I'll give you 1,000 cows. Each cow has 2 horns, and there'll be golden coin in each horn. So you will get 1,000 cows, and you will have 2,000 gold coins if you prove yourself to be the greatest philosopher of Bharatvarsha. So that is how that starts. And in the 7th section is the Antaryami Brahmanam. Atahi enam uddalakaha arunihi. Okay, our Uddalaka Aruni actually asks Yajnavalkya this question. Okay, so that is how profound it is. Uddalaka is a great philosopher of Bharatvarsha. Yajnavalkya is one of the greatest philosophers of Yajnavalkya. These two guys are having a discussion about who is cosmic sutram and who is the Antaryamin. So go and check that out, because our guru Yajnavalkya then says, Tat sutram vayuna vai gautama sutram. So he and Yajnavalkya Visal, Vayuna vai Gautama Sutram. Ayam chalokaha, param chalokaha, sarvani chabhutani, sandrubdani bhavanti. Tasmad vai Gautama Purusham. It's beautiful verses. I mean, I can't stop, but it's wonderful verses that talk about how Yajnavalkya teaches Uddalaka this cosmic Antaryaman and this cosmic Sutram that holds everything together, the Prana Tattva that holds all the living beings together. And when we understand the Upanishads, this Sutram that is described here, Tat Sutram Vayuna, the 7th verse of Gita, Mattaha Paratanam na anyad kinchid asti dhananjaya mai sarvam idam protam sutre maniganaiva. That sutra there goes into higher levels of philosophy. Okay, who is that sutra? Is it the cosmic sutra or the Antaryaman? There are two ways of looking at this verse. One is the cosmic sutram, which is the Prana Tattva, and inside him, which is the Antaryaman, he is also the sutra of the whole cosmic, creation. Look at our Purusha Shukta. Mukad Indrashta Agnishta Pranad Vayur Ajayata. Of Purusha Shukta of the Rig Veda, where it says, from my breath comes the Vayu. Who is the cosmic sutram or the prana? So these are all some profound statements of the Upanishads that hopefully will allow you to appreciate how much importance the Vedic Rishis have given to this prana tattva and this prana and apana and so on. But what we are doing at this point, which is sad, is we have just stuck up at the physiological levels and we are just more interested in this pranayama business. And there are people who run business of this and make money out of this. But we have actually not gone and understand what is the message of the Upanishads, because we are after knowledge. This pranayama is only for the body. We need to have pranayama of the soul. For the pranayama of the souls, we need to take the message of the Vedas as to what they talk about the prana tattva. So this cosmic Antaryamin concept is then discussed by Yajnavalkya in this section with 21 beautiful verses. I just want to bring quick one. Yaha pranena tishtan. Yeah. Pranad antaro yam prano naveda yasya pranaha shariram yaha pranam antaro yamayati yeshata atma antaryami amrutaha. So these are all big verse of Yajnavalkya Uddalaka. So check that out. Antaryami Brahmanam Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And this is my last slide here. And again, this concept of prana, as I just want to provide evidence here as to this is not just, don't take my word for it as to how important this prana tattva for Vedic Rishi and Vedic philosophy is. Much of it is not available out there in the various transliterations or the various channels that I've seen. It's very, very sad that they don't go into the core philosophies of the Vedas. If you look at the Upanishad, everywhere it is prana tattva. In fact, without understanding the concept of prana, we cannot contemplate Prashna Upanishad at all, because that is what the first question is. That is what the 6th question, that is what all the questions of the Prashna Upanishad is talking about, this prana. Yeah. Tan varishtaha prana uvacha. So that comes in the 2nd question. Okay, so look at that. Then all the devatas recite 9 mantras praising prana tattva in Prashna Upanishad. Now in Aitareya Upanishad, there is an example of Rudra, Surya, Chandra and Agni and Prana having a discussion as who is superior. Then they go to Prajapati and Prajapati says, okay, do an experiment. Why don't each one of you leave one body? And then first Rudra leaves, okay, mind does not work. Surya leaves, eyes does not work. Chandra leaves, only the hearing does not work, but the body is nicely functioning. Agni leaves, only the speech does not work, the rest of the body is working fine. But when prana leaves, the whole body shuts down and all these guys have to leave. That is exactly the same analogy that is given in Prashna Upanishad about this Madhukara Raja that I have told you on a few occasions, where the king of the bees, when he is in the beehive, all the bees are here. And when he leaves, or he or she leaves the beehive, all other bees have to leave. That is exactly what Aitareya Upanishad talks about. And there is a separate vidya called Prana Vidya of Chandogya Upanishad. Ataha Prana, Aham Shreyasi. That is how it starts. Prana Vidya. Check that out. Isha Upanishad, 17th verse. Vayu Ranilam Amrutam Yadidam Basmantam Shariram. Om Krutosmara 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 Krutosmara. That is how it celebrates this Vayu, who is Anilam, who is Amrutam. Yad idam basmantam shariram. When the body goes, he is still there. Yeah. Again, as I said, in Mundaka Upanishad, clearly establishes that prana's antaryamin is Vishnu. Go to Vishnu Sahasranama, 91st verse. Vayuvahanaha. He celebrated. Vishnu is given a name. His name is what? Vayuvahanaha. What is that Vayuvahanaha? Think about Ramayana here. So what happened in Ramayana at one point? Hanumanta had Rama on the right shoulder, Lakshmana on the left shoulder, and he flies. Okay, this is not just a story, but actually it is deep levels of philosophy, because that is what Prana Tattva does. He holds the Sat in one shoulder and he takes the Jiva in the other shoulder. And when the time of the Stula Sharira is over, he leaves the body under the instruction of the Sat. He carries the prana out. Okay, so it's a very, very powerful metaphor that is described in Ramayana as to why he is called as Vayuvahana, because of all the things that I have said so far. Okay, but at the same time, Vishnu is also celebrated as Garuda Vahana. Okay, so I'm going to take a minute there. Who is going to tell us why Vishnu is also celebrated as Garuda Vahana in our scriptures? Okay, no worries. So Garuda. Okay, so this is again is very metaphorical, and we need to think about this. So in Bali, for example, there is a Garuda Vishnu place that I've been, where there is this 100 or 200 feet statue of Garuda, and on whom Vishnu is. It's an amazing place. It's a very mystical place to visit. That Garuda Vishnu place in Bali, where this is very beautifully captured. But what is the philosophical sense? Does Vishnu really fly on this bird with wings called Garuda and travel around? That is a very, very superficial way of looking at it. What does Garuda actually signifies? Okay, so if you think about, when we talk about Garuda, we should always think about Sesha and Rudra. Garuda, Sesha, Rudra. They're all three of them are exalted souls who are in the 5th rank of the Vedic pantheon. Garuda is the Abhimani Devata of the Vedas. Okay, that is the key idea. He is the Abhimani Devata of the Vedas. So that should give you the truth as to why he is called Garuda Vahana. He is called Garuda Vahana because this Vishnu comes only when you know the Vedas. So Veda is his Vahana. And you get to know the Vishnu. Vishnu comes to you when you use this Vahana called the Vedas, whose Abhimani Devata is Garuda. So when we use that, then we understand he is also Vayuvahanaha, because all the Upanishads talk about that. Okay, so these are all some really core inner, I won't say secrets, but the inner truths of the Upanishads that I think we have been fortunate to kind of dissect and understand this in this forum. Okay, so once he finishes off the ideas of who the Prana Tattva is, then Yama talks about a related area. And we have discussed this in the last class, where we said all over the Upanishads, there are three ways in which, or the three symbols by which we can understand the Supreme Being. One is in Bhuta, one is on earth, one is in the atmosphere, and one is in the heavens. Yeah, so and that is what he's going to talk about. Agni etaiko, Vayu etaiko, Suryo yata sarvalokasya. Okay, so he's going to talk about how to think about this Antaryami Brahman. How do you think about this Antaryamin who is there in all jivas? And he takes these examples, Agnir, Vayu and Surya, and then there are some really, really important verses. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha. Okay. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Bahishta. So he uses these words 4 times, not surprisingly, because the Rig Veda, there is a very big mantra in the 6th mandala. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babuvaha Tadasya Rupam Pratichakshanaya. Indro Mayabihi Purarupa Iyate Yukta Hasya Harayaha Shatadasha. This is a foundational verse of Rig Veda from which entire philosophy comes. Madhu Brahmanam, a Brihadaranyaka Upanishad also talks about the same thing. Rupam Rupam Pratirupo Babhuva Tadasya Rupam Pratijakshanaya. Okay, so we will see all this in the next class of what are the profound truths of these verses and what are the three symbols of worship of God and how do we worship the Supreme and so on. So we'll take it up next week. So on that note, I will complete my session today, Krishna Pranamastu, and we can have some discussions if there are any. Pragneshji.
I understood something today which I have always known before in our culture. I'm sure it must be in other parts of India also. Following the death in the mourning period, there is usually Garud Purana part listening, and I can understand when you were talking about the Garud Vahana and the Abhimani Devata of Vedas as Vishnu, that because we believe that the soul is still in the atmosphere nearby, we get together as a family and do Patha of Garuda Purana. Maybe that is the correct concept. Am I thinking right?
Yes, Pragneshji, you're thinking right, but Garuda Purana, what it does is, I got 3 volumes of Garuda Purana at home, but I have to confess, I have not read it, but I've heard Garuda Purana being told in various family occasions. Garuda Purana basically tells you about what is the career, what is the destinations of souls. It's quite an interesting Purana from that sense. It gives you what happens to souls after death, the ones that have done good deeds, what happened to them, the ones that do bad deeds, what happens to them, what kind of sufferings and punishments that they go through and everything else. It is discussed in great detail in Garuda Purana, not to scare us, but actually to tell us that in this sadhana sharira, do the right thing. So that is the essential key messages of Garuda Purana. But again, you're right in the sense that Garuda Purana, Garuda is the Abhimani Devata of Vedas. And only through the Vedas, we can appreciate Vishnu. And Vishnu is actually, whether you like it or not, there is something called the predestination of souls, because Vishnu is Sarvajna. He knows, and Krishna has said this in Gita, that I know about all these jivas, what has happened to them in the past, what is happening now, what will happen to them in the future, and so on and so forth. He knows everything. It is us, because of our ignorance, we are trying to play something here and think that we are great beings, and small things that we achieve, we think it's the greatest achievement. But our destination is already fixed according to the Vedas in that higher sense. We are just trying to find out what the destination that has been charted for us. So Garuda Purana kind of describes all this. So yes, Pragneshi, it kind of links up. Thank you. Okay, so if there are no further questions, I'm going to ask one of our friends to take us through Om. So maybe I can pick Shushrutji today. Shushrut, do you want to take us through Om recitation, please? Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So we'll catch up next week. Hare Krishna. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.